vote, you ask for a ballot, you give an address. I mean, if there are 3 to 5 million illegal voters, excuse me, you can't find 3? So
Right.
this whole order is meant to stop alien voters. Well, look, aliens, if you're not an American, don't vote in our elections. Okay, that's simple. And if you do, I hope you get caught and go to prison. It's a 10-year sentence, then you get deported. That's why people don't do it. And so here's the problem, that within that bill, for example, it is going to allow secretaries of state, that is those political hacks that run our elections in each state. We're one of the only nations outside of Russia that lets partisan politicians run our elections. So we have these political operatives, like, for example, Brad Raffensperger, purger of Georgia, who will now be given access to what are called the save files of the Department of Homeland Security. That's, Kristi Noem. Lock up your dogs if you see her. Kristi Noem, who's head of Department of Homeland Security. Now, they're going to release lists of immigrants, immigration files. Well, to see if anyone who's been deported or is not a citizen is registered to vote. That sounds fair on its face, except for one thing. That file, that can't work. In fact, they tried it. Florida. It was about 2008. Florida used that Department of Homeland Security list to look for illegal aliens on its voter rolls. They tagged 172,000 Floridians as illegal alien voters. And guess what? Out of 172,000, they saw a lot of Jose Garcias, a lot of Luis Hernandez's, a lot of people named Johnson, etc. These people lost their vote. The only way they could get their vote back was take a day out, go to a federal court, and prove that they are who they are. So you had easily over 100,000 voters lose their vote. And by the way, how many illegal aliens did they catch? I have to say, they did. One. An Austrian Republican. No, it wasn't Arnold.
Of course.
So one, but 172,000 people lost their vote. And people wonder, how did Florida suddenly go from voting twice for Obama to going red? Well, take a look at what they do to the voter rolls there. So so they're going to take what the Florida disaster, when I say disaster for Americans, not a disaster for the GOP, because
For them, it was successful.
It's successful because of the people that they were able to block from voting. And you can even see the pictures of some of these people. That's just one of the horror shows in this business. The other, you can ask some questions. Otherwise, I'll continue to go on and on with this horror show.
Yeah. Well, I actually want you to continue to go on with what else is in this, because, part of the challenge of assessing this Trump administration is so much of what they do is illegal. I mean, it's just, they do what they want and then let the courts try to come in after the fact and do their best to clean it up. They openly defy court orders. My understanding is, so one of the provisions of this executive order is requiring everyone to not just attest that they're citizens, which is already a requirement, but to provide certain proof, things like your passport, that you are in fact a citizen and eligible voter. And my understanding of the law is that Congress has passed a law, the National Voter Registration Act, also known as the Motor Voter Law, that sets those requirements. And so to do that, to add an additional requirement on top of that, is actually illegal. And, my understanding based on this something similar gone to the Supreme Court, it was struck down 7-2. That's a pretty open and shut legal case. So part of my struggle to understand what the full impact of this will be is like, what are they going to be able to actually accomplish? What is going to be blocked by the courts? And then how will they respond if the courts do try to block some of the actions contained in this executive order?
Wow. Okay. Well, that was actually pretty informative. Obviously, you went to graduate school. So.
No, I just read a lot.
Well, that's maybe because you didn't go to graduate school. But there's two. The number one thing that people have noticed in this bill that's been reported is that you're going to have to prove you're a citizen to vote. Now, again, this goes back to the alien spaceships and the Canadian mooses that are coming in to vote. You see all those sombreros floating in the Rio Grande. All these people are coming out to vote in our elections, except they can't find any. They can't find any. Now, However, you're going to have to prove your citizenship. Here are the problems with that. There's only two basic ways to prove your citizenship, or I should say three. The first is your birth certificate. Original, no copies, no photocopies, no cell phone scans, my friends. Do you know where your original birth certificate is? Do you know where your mom put it? No, you don't, I bet.
Nope.
Okay, 69 million women have changed their names to their husband's name. Sorry, marriage certificate doesn't cut it. Military ID, guess what? It doesn't. They don't accept military ID as proof of citizenship because you don't have to be a citizen to register for the U.S. military. So they don't accept military ID. Obviously, they don't accept student IDs. And they don't accept driver's licenses, my friends, because that doesn't indicate your citizenship, except for there's some 5 states that allow you, if you have one of those real IDs, 5 states allow you to say, I'm a citizen. But basically, you have at least, according to the Brennan Center for Justice, at least 21 million Americans who are legal citizens, legal voters, but they don't have access to the original birth certificate or a passport. That's the main form of proving citizenship. And here we go. First of all, only 43% of white people have passports, but they like the fact that only 34, 1 out of 3 black people have passports. Okay, so they know what they're doing by making ID ethnically imbalanced, to put it in the most polite manner. Let's call it Jim Crow and shafting black people out of their votes. So you're talking about attack on women. You're talking about attack on black voters. You're talking about, and by the way, also naturalization papers would work. But then you've got this show me your papers issue in the Hispanic community. So this proof of citizenship business, now it was tried again. It was tried once before. Chris Kobach, who is Donald Trump's great vote fraud hunter, he is now Attorney General of Kansas. But when he was Secretary of State there, he changed the state voter registration form to require proof of citizenship. 32,000 or maybe 36, anyway, 30-some thousand voters were blocked from registering. Chris Kobach, this by the way, he's the Heritage Fellow on Immigration for Project 2025. Chris Kobach goes to the federal court and admits to a federal judge that he blocked 30,000 plus voters. Not one, he admitted not one was an alien voter. Everyone was a legal voter. But he said, oh, what's the big deal? We're just asking for this requirement to maintain the integrity of the system. Well, when you remove 30,000 voters, and by the way, they weren't just any voters. They were concentrated in 2 groups. One was students at University of Kansas Lawrence. And in other words, voters of color, which is blue. The other was a big group of at the Air Force Base in Kansas. So you had we have a black military these days, if you may have taken notice, and you had a lot of black Air Force officers who are not allowed to vote again because military ID doesn't count. A lot of these people had moved from other areas and didn't have the original birth certificate. They lost. So we had American military officers blocked by the GOP in voting. So we've seen this before. And I'll just throw in one other thing. When you said it looks like it's unconstitutional, you betcha. Now, so don't rely on Greg Palast. I spoke with Professor Barbara Arnwine. She was adjunct at Columbia University Law School and also the head of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. She's probably the most important voting rights scholar in America. And she just said, this is a direct violation of the 10th Amendment. You're correct, in the Constitution. Now, you all remember the 10th Amendment, which said that only the Congress, not the president, may set the terms for federal elections. So it's a direct violation of the 10th Amendment. Then I spoke to Gerald Griggs. He's the president of the NAACP of Georgia. And he was saying this is also like an in-your-face violation of the Voting Rights Act. I know the Voting Rights Act and the National Voter Registration Act. I know these are fancy terms to throw around, but that's what protects our vote. And it's a direct violation in the face of these laws. So one of the things